News broke earlier today on Tuesday that the Biden administration was yet again extending the student loan pause, this time until June 2023. And SoFi's bad week is piling on because on Monday, regulators were urged to look into the company's crypto activity. And as a result of these two pieces of news, SoFi stock closed trading today at an all-time low of $4.66 per share. And in this video, I'm going to be covering both of these pieces of news, why they're important, and where we go from here. Okay, so starting off chronologically, let's first talk about the regulation and then we can move into the student loan pause. As always, if you do enjoy these videos, please share them out, and if you do appreciate consistent SoFi news, commentary, and analysis, please subscribe to the channel for more. Okay, so starting off with the regulation, there's been a ton of scrutiny in the space ever since FTX blew up recently, especially because the FTX crash brought down a lot of investors with it. On Monday, the US Senate Bank Committee wrote an open letter to Anthony Noto concerned around SoFi's crypto asset trading activities as they affect users. Now, you can go through this letter in detail as it's attached in the description below, but just to summarize at a high level, it highlights that per the conditions of the bank charter, which SoFi gained in January of 2022, the company had 2 whole years, so until 2024, to fully divest out of cryptocurrency trading. Instead, the letter from lawmakers claims that SoFi expanded their crypto offering as opposed to reducing it, and this comes under fire from a regulatory perspective with regards to their bank charter. The letter highlights other points towards SoFi facilitating crypto asset trading and issuing warnings around the risks involved in the space, referring to a couple of schemes as pump and dump schemes. This is basically like the fine print on their policies that they're getting hung up on here. And finally, the letter concludes with a few questions around SoFi's policies in general around crypto assets, how they determine risk requirements, whether SoFi does or does not sell any securities, and finally, to expand on SoFi's plans for the crypto side of their business as a whole. Basically, they're looking for a plan on how SoFi is going to divest out of crypto. Now, later that same day on Monday, SoFi put out a Twitter thread sharing some of the details around their regulatory compliance in the crypto space. They mentioned in this thread that crypto is a non-material component of their business, and we'll dive into the numbers in just a second. But first, let me read the rest of this thread. SoFi in their thread continues, "We have no direct exposure to FTX, FTT token, Alameda Research, or Genesis. We do not engage in any other crypto financing activity outside of allowing members to buy and sell cryptocurrency through our platform executed by a third-party custody partner. No leveraging, no yielding, none of the financing aside of crypto. All they do is buy and sell." So that automatically answers one of the questions that regulators had. As of September 30th, 2022, the value of our digital assets was $132 million. In the most recent quarter, we reported $3.85 million of brokerage fees, of which digital asset revenue is a component. This also includes our share lending and payment for order flow arrangements related to SoFi Invest products, as well as exchange conversion services. So basically, out of the $441 million in revenue that they reported for Q3, only 3.85 was with regards to brokerage fees. And out of this 3.85, you have to split it out further to find the specifics for crypto. So it's a fraction of their total revenue. It's less than 1% of their total revenue. And later that day, SoFi released an 8K form basically reiterating on the points that they had in that tweet, that they are compliant with the rules around the bank charter, that crypto revenue is less than 1% of their total revenue, and that they don't do any crypto financing other than buying and selling. Nothing related to FTX at all, which is mainly what the regulators, I think, are looking for. So to wrap up this segment, I'll share my take very quickly. Personally, this sounds like a fishing expedition from these lawmakers in the Senate committee, who will likely have a dialogue with SoFi over the details with the company on the specifics around their crypto trading. The absolute worst case scenario that I can imagine is that SoFi shuts down their crypto segment, which, as we covered earlier in this video, is a fraction of total revenue. However, I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to get settled with just a back and forth dialogue with senators, as SoFi has been pretty responsive with regards to cooperating with lawmakers. Some people online were asking whether or not SoFi could lose their banking charter altogether as a result of this, and frankly, I think this is extremely unlikely because it took a lot of time and effort and scrutiny from many different government agencies to even allow SoFi to have a bank charter. There's a lot of back and forth discussion and negotiations to go into this before that is even a remote possibility. So basically that's my stance, that this is a nothing burger, nothing is going to come from this. There's no serious repercussions. The worst case scenario that can happen is SoFi shuts down their crypto segment. However, this does not stop the fact that it hurt the stock in the short term because it serves as a bad publicity for the company, as many people online were just jumping into the worst case scenario of SoFi potentially losing a bank charter. And this is clearly not the case given this cooperation, right? SoFi responded immediately later that day to that letter, even though they had until December 8th to just gather all their thoughts, because they knew they were compliant. They knew that everything was on par in terms of a regulatory compliance perspective. So I don't think anything's going to happen from this. It's a minor piece of news. Yes, it's unfortunate that it hurt the stock in the short term, and it's also unfortunate that a lot of people just read the headlines and they don't actually read the details of what's happening, but that's why I make these videos ultimately. Moving on to our second piece of news, earlier today on Tuesday, the Biden administration announced that the student loan moratorium was yet again being pushed out.
The Secretary of Education is extending the pause on student loan payments while we seek relief from the courts, but no later than June 30, 2023, which would give the Supreme Court an opportunity to hear the case in its current term. Payments will resume 60 days after the pause ends.
Now, just to remind everyone, the pause on federal student loans started way back in March of 2020 as a COVID measure. We can expect this to conclude in June of 2023. Over 3 years later. And that is assuming it doesn't get pushed out even further, which is a big assumption at this point because it's gotten pushed out like 8 times so far. On this channel, we've been following this news specifically along with this specific scenario for several weeks now. I've made 3 videos prior to this one discussing this very topic, and in those videos I've expressed that my confidence that the student loan would resume in January was very high. I didn't think that they would push it out again, especially because, as I mentioned previously, it deteriorates the administration's trust from the people. But seeing as this news comes almost immediately after the midterm election, I guess I'm not really surprised. To recap, the reason is with regards to an attempted block on the student debt relief plan, as many were claiming it was unlawful and required further approvals. This was from the 8th Circuit District Court of Appeals, as well as a judge out of Texas, who basically stated that Biden alone did not have the authority to grant those funds. Now, whether he did have the authority or he didn't have the authority, that's going to be for the Supreme Court to decide, because that's where it's going, to a Supreme Court hearing. And what this means for the payment pause is it's going to be paused until that hearing is complete from the Supreme Court, which could be June, it could be earlier than June, but it also could be later than June. And, judging from what we know for government inefficiencies, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's later than June. Now, obviously, some consequences to SoFi's business is, number one, the fact that student loans will continue to be depressed in the business, and the refinancing surge that we saw, similar to Q4 2021, which, by the way, on aggregate was SoFi's best quarter ever, is also going to see some negative pressure as borrowers are no longer in a rush to refinance given the further extension. So, number one, student loans is going to be depressed. Number two, refinancing for Q4 would be depressed as well. Interestingly, last week at Citi's FinTech conference, SoFi's CEO, Anthony Noto, expressed his concerns around the student loan refinance pause that was up in the air. He was basically not very confident that it was going to resume in January. He said it's a matter of if it does. I made a full video on the top insights from this conference, which you can check out in the description. You can also check it out at the end of this video. But in that conference, Anthony Noto explained that due to the diversity of SoFi's business offerings, they will thrive regardless of whether student loans continues or doesn't continue in January of 2023. The silver lining here seems to be the fact that SoFi has been contingency planning based on this scenario, assuming student loans does not resume in January. Everything said and done, with macro being where it is, SoFi stock hit an all-time low today of $4.66 per share. The crypto regulation news is very short-lived. I think it will not have a material impact on the stock, but I do think the student loan news is much larger because many investors and analysts we're pricing in the student loan segment coming back to life in 2023 into their models for price targets and for also guidance. Now, the biggest indicator for SoFi is we'll see in Q4 what their guidance is for 2023, because that's essentially going to set the tone for the business. But I wouldn't be surprised if that guidance is not raised or in fact is lowered based on this scenario. However, in the long term, I think the business will be absolutely fine. It's just a matter of when this gets resumed. If it doesn't get resumed in the first 6 months, so be it. If it doesn't get resumed in 2023 altogether, so be it. SoFi stock will just have an extended period of time where it will be depressed because of those earnings, but eventually it will come back because student loans is a fundamental part of SoFi's business. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it out and subscribing to the channel. For right now, this is the Fundamentals of Investing podcast. Thank you so much for listening.